everyone, and welcome to Soul Talk. I am your host, Soul, and today I have my very special guest, Cheryl. Cheryl, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Excited to talk some Dresden Files with you. That's one of our topics later today.
Yes.
But we'll be talking about recent books, recent movies, recent TV watch, a little bit of extra, because it can be things that have recently come out. It can be things that are several years old, like the Dresden Files. So why don't we go straight into it? As I already said, our recent books, Dresden Files. Go ahead, Cheryl. You're the one who introduced me to this.
Well, before we get started, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad that the two of us are on screen together and we can prove once and for all we are, in fact, not the same person. So, yay us. um, but yeah, Dresden Files. So clearly, I'm the one who kept hounding you to read them. They're one of my favorite series ever. As you can tell behind me, I've got my stack of books here, all of them. So now that you've read the first one, and I assume you liked it, we can get into that later. But that's what you have to look forward to. Quite a few books. But it's a really great series. The author is Jim Butcher. Um, Actually, he came onto my radar. I was going camping for a week in a place with no cell phone reception, and therefore a laptop would also be useless. So I went on eBay back in the day when you would buy physical things off of eBay, like books and games and stuff. Um, and I was looking for a series that would pass the time for a week. Highly recommended by all the people online and a few friends. And so I said, sure, why not? Got a box of books and why not? So clearly, you got to start at the beginning. First book called Stormfront. I forget when exactly it came out, but
2000.
2000. Okay, that was a while ago. Um, but yeah, so this is your first time reading it, and I gotta pick your brain. What first thoughts? Just what comes to mind? First thoughts.
It was a pretty quick read. I think it's only over around 200 pages. I was reading it on the Libby app, so it says like 400 and something, but I think it is around like 200 and something pages. And yeah, it was very quick. It was very funny in places. Yeah, there you go. There it is. And I just really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the way the magic was introduced and the world of the magic was introduced. And like there was moments too where you could tell that it was written a little bit later ago, which is back in 2000, that like there is some things that some people might criticize as being like a little sexist, but it's fully shown like that he is a man of his old ways, and he's like he even knows it himself. And then like you also have like characters like the Inspector Murphy, who's like you're a pig. So like people are acknowledging, and he acknowledges that like he's kind of weird, because I think like at the very beginning he was calling like comparing women to cheerleaders like several
Yeah.
times, and I'm like, wait, is he just gonna compare every woman to a cheerleader? But
So if we, those are good first thoughts, and I know you haven't had a lot of time to process this because I did hound you, and I've hounded you for a while, and you finally took the plunge and decided to read it only a few days ago. Um, but to set the setting a little bit, so Dresden Files, the focus of the first book and the rest of the series is about a wizard named Harry Dresden. And I think when you meet him, he is about middle aged. He works as a private detective in Chicago. And I love like the amount of detail that Jim Butcher puts into this. For instance, it says, you know, he lives in Chicago and he's in the Chicago Yellow Pages under Harry Dresden, wizard. Lost items found, paranormal investigations, consulting advice, reasonable rates. No love potions, endless purses, or parties or other entertainment. Like that is supposedly in the Yellow Pages in Chicago when this book happens, right? Um, so you can kind of tell that the environment that we're going into and the world we're going into, it's an alternate modern day. There are things like there are cars, there's the mafia. We'll get to the characters later. There's guns, but then there's also, you know, wizard and magic and councils, which I'm going to be very, I'm not going to try to spoil anything. So if I do, like, I apologize in advance, but this is a really good series that goes a lot of different places. And honestly, what gets introduced in this first book, it just builds on top of each other and as new characters and new pieces of supernatural elements or folklore gets introduced, you can already tell like it starts intertwining and building on top of each other. So somehow it's able to be this cohesive universe, which is where a lot of novels fall apart, right? You just, the universe doesn't work. The more
Right.
you add to it, the more the pie crumbles. Um, so yeah, um, I believe was Thomas in this book as
No,
well.
no,
Okay, so I'll skip the
no.
Tomas, which I'm saying it with an accent, a terrible accent, but an
Is he
accent nonetheless.
Latino?
No, supposed well, he has a French act. We will put it
Oh,
that
he's French. Okay.
way. I,
Tomas.
I I wouldn't say he's French, but sometimes he pretends to be French. um, so let's not go down that path. And the camera's over here. So you do have vampires that you've met right in this book. We've met
There's
wizards.
one vampire that you meet in this first book, and
Okay.
it's the lady who's in charge of basically what is like the whorehouse.
Yes, there is a
Yeah.
whorehouse. So for those of you who are interested, there are whorehouses in this area. Um, so, and spoiler alert, there's more than one vampire. Okay. You also have police detective work. You've got the mafia. Um, a fairy was introduced, correct?
Yeah.
Tut Tut, who is
Tut tut. Yeah.
an amazing character. Like, it's one of those things where it's just a small little thing that gets introduced and he keeps appearing throughout the series, and then it just gets built on in ways that are very amusing, but do play a big role eventually. Like, so you never know with these small characters what they grow into and how Jim Butcher evolves them over time. And honestly, every book you read makes you want to read it more. And I did warn you, I'm like, you're going to want to get the other ones ready so that you can read them when
I
you're
have the
done with
second
this.
one ready on the Libby app right now. And the funny thing about this story too is that it looks like a combination of a book that my dad would read and a book that I would read because my dad's also a very avid reader, but he's more on the dad books, the ones that have like police and the ones that have like,
Yeah.
or he'll read like nonfiction, like a book about Bobby Kennedy or stuff like that. So like those
Yeah.
are the types of books that he reads. So it's like with me, if you look at the shelf behind me, there's a lot of fantasy back here. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like a combination of something my dad would read and something I would read. And I kind of just loved that it wasn't that high fantasy. It was that modern world. And then
It's
you could just you
grounded.
it's grounded, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not like, oh, let's take a kid and put him in wizard school for 7 years, because that's, a very distinct Harry Potter-esque thing. That is a lot of people like, and people grew up with that. This is very different. It is, I forget when they explain how Dresden met Lieutenant Murphy, who that's like his
Not yet.
go-to in the police department for like they end up calling him when there are weird, unexplained, very strange deaths. I think there were a few strange deaths in this book, right?
Yeah.
Um, and over time, you do get to meet a few people from the department, but Karen Murphy, um,
And then
female,
Carmichael is the other one that was introduced, like her
okay,
partner.
her partner, yeah. So I will say Karen Murphy is a badass. She's a woman in the police department, and she may not know exactly what's going on because she didn't grow up with magic. She's not really aware of the supernatural, everything, but she hangs there and she trusts Harry enough to like follow his lead or push back when it needs to be pushed back, and figure out why these people that she is in charge of, protecting are dropping like flies in later books. I forget exactly how many people are killed in this one. But there's some very targeted aspects of people who are in trouble. But
Yeah, it's definitely a mature book for a mature audience. I
mhm,
do want to go into just because it's not much of a spoiler, but it's a just Harry Dresden's style. I loved
yeah.
the fact that I was like, okay, this is the look where he is in sweatpants, a t-shirt, and cowboy boots.
Okay.
And just I love too that this book does give you like that visual. It tells you like exactly how either he or the other people around him like what they're wearing, what they so when you're reading the book it gives you that good visuals in your head. If you have that imagination and that like the visuals when you're reading a book, like this book has it.
I was gonna wonder why you didn't bring up his car to the extent where I was trying to pull up the exact wording for it, but he does drive an old Beetle. And the other interesting fact that makes this series different than others is magic doesn't necessarily work with technology in this series, right? So there are things that are very specific to the modern world that would be extremely helpful, such as cell phones. And guess what? Harry Dresden can't use a cell phone. So what does he
Or
do?
a laptop.
Or a laptop, or like lights in his home, his apartment, which, his apartment is a very interesting place to be over the series. I don't
He
know
has
how much.
candles.
Okay. So, spoiler alert, there's some destruction in that apartment over the entire series. It's pretty funny. Um, but, so there's things like, okay, the police department wants to get in touch with him. For the case of being a private investigator, he has, I think, a rotary phone somewhere. He's also got, a basement for his lab down underneath, which I believe, since you were texting me throughout this whole experience, that you were in fact introduced to Bob. Do you want to
Yes.
explain Bob?
Bob might be my favorite character.
That is always, yes. Bob is
So
amazing.
it's not really a spoiler because he gets introduced pretty quickly, and you since we already know here that like Harry Dresden, with not being able to thanks Ben for the spoiler warning, our wonderful producer. And so Bob is this skull. He's a head, he's a spirit that lives inside this skull that he can be let loose, but anytime he gets less loose, he does some weird, crazy stuff that I'm not going to spoil. But and I'm sure he does some more. I can just imagine what he'll do in future books, and I can't wait to read it. But
So
the reason he has
I
Bob is
won't
because he
spoil
can't
it.
use a computer. So Bob holds all the memories and all the things that Harry needs to do because he can't like type it down like, oh, Word document, let me type how to do this spell or how to do this. He can't put that in a computer because he can't use it. So he's like, yo, Bob, how do I make this spell?
Yeah, and I won't spoil it, but one of the big things in this universe is nothing is free. So if you're casting magic, there's a price to pay. Or if you want somebody to use their magical um, abilities on your behalf, there's usually an exchange of some sort. And I won't give away what Bob requests for use of his magical ability, but it's very amusing and it's great, and that does in fact continue and get taken to interesting places in later books in this series. And you can
I
tell by the
can't
grin
wait.
on my face, I am like, you need to finish these books so I can talk to you about
There's
these things.
like a
Oh my
gazillion
god.
of them. And the thing too with Jim Butcher is that it's not just like his earlier books, it was like one each year. But like
Mhm.
there's two books that came out here in 2020, and there's other years where he cranked out two books in one year.
Mhm.
So this man is just cranking these book out. I think each year from 2000 all the way to 2020, he has had a book I think every single year, and that's crazy.
Yeah, and although one year somebody messed with the entire fan base because on April Fools they released a statement that kind of looked like it was from him, and it wasn't because it was an April Fool's joke, but it was like, "Hey, he's announced how many more books are in the series," and it's like 54 or something ridiculous. And literally all my friends and myself who knew the series were like, no. um, but he does have a plan, and he also understands that fans are curious about things. So, in addition to the main books in the series, there's a few that are like a compilation of short stories. So, like, they'll follow this side character going on like some mini adventure because, Dresden's out of town and somebody needs help. Or, oh, this other person is introduced, or let's go follow this family for a while. And you're going to look back at this and be like, that family? Because when I mention a family, you will know exactly which family I'm talking about eventually. I forget when they're introduced. But um, it is it's interesting because it gives you a little bit more time with these smaller characters, and it's just a tidbit to have fun and following some small threads of ideas, but he's not going to like generate an entire book off of them. He's
Yeah.
going to keep them contained so he can continue to wrap up his story. And let me
So they're
see.
basically just short little novellas.
Yeah. um where are my notes? Okay, yeah. So I believe there are currently 17 books that have been released for the series. Two of them came out this year. The idea is that it will be wrapped up with 22 case books. So each of these is like, oops, there's a camera. Clearly, I'm experienced at this, right? Each of these books is focused on like one case file, let's say. So either the police call him in for some murder or something strange, or he experiences something and he's working through it. And sometimes he asks Lieutenant Murphy for help, sometimes he asks other people for help. Sometimes the character Morgan, who I believe his name is either Morgan Donald or Donald Morgan, you find that out later, but Morgan is following him around causing trouble. So,
I
and
met
Morgan,
Morgan in this first book.
and I mean, everything we're talking about is kind of like spoiler alert, but he's supposed to be a good guy. But the way he acts with Dresden, who like there are 17 books based on Dresden, and he seems to be a pretty nice guy. You're like, why is Morgan so suspicious? Why is he following him around? What is the deal with everything? And again, I can talk about this for hours. So we'll get into some other things that involve Morgan and wizards and councils, because a little bit of that was introduced. So yeah,
And
we had.
definitely when I read the subsequent books in this series, we'll have Cheryl back on just to continue talking about Dresden Files, because I think
Hell yeah.
there's a few other people, like we're part of a Discord, and there's a few other people on there that have read Dresden Files. So it wasn't just you, but you were the one that was mainly hounding me to read it out of all of them. All of them were like, "Oh yeah, it's a good series," whenever you
Yeah.
mention it. But so I'm sure that when I will read book two and on and on and on, I'll be like, "Hey Cheryl, come to Soul Talk because we got some Dresden Files to discuss."
And I will bring my wonderful physical props with me, which for those young people, these are actual books. Actual books. Um, but okay, so we talked about Harry, Bob the Skull, Lieutenant Karen Murphy, and her partner in the detectives realm. Uh, and we mentioned the mafia.
Mm,
What was your first reaction to Gentleman Johnny Marcone, right? Marcone? Yeah,
Marconi.
Marcone. I don't know how to say things out loud, okay? I mess up names all the time. So,
And
Gentleman Johnny Marcone.
So when I was reading him, I was going, okay, this is a very interesting character, and it brought me to things that like, oh, this is the mafia type character that you get when like you're watching like a Goodfellas, which that's something that we've recently talked about on this channel, Media Sweaties Network,
And
that we have
spoiler
blind spot.
alert, there were mafia members in Chicago. That did, in fact, happen, okay?
Most big cities had mafia members,
Yes.
and even like not so big, like the not bigger cities like of in New Jersey had mafia members. So
Mhm.
the mafia is throughout, and they did war with. I think Chicago warred with New York in certain,
Yes.
uh, but off of that, it was very much of a like this is a guy who's all about business, and that he's willing to do what he has to do with the mafia, but it's not one of those where he's just gonna kill people just to kill people. It's more
Mhm.
of a like, so that was my impression of him, and I'm interested to see how Harry Dresden and this guy go forward, because I know the way they interacted in the first book and the way they were left with each other in the first book. Predict that in further books they'll still have some more interactions with each other.
So if I come back, which I'm more than happy to come back about Dresden Files, I want you to write down some of these predictions, and we're going to take a look back at these as you go through the series and see, were they correct? Were they not? And how far off were you? Because the one of the best things about Jim Butcher is some things are very much to the point, and what you see is what you get, but you have no idea what path it's going to take to get you there. So, like, for instance, this first book, Stormfront, is the title of that. Were there a few storms in this book? There were some pretty badass storms on this book. And so if you look at the titles, let me pull
I
up
think the next one, just from the title, is has to do with vampires, is my guess.
Full Moon, I think is right.
Yeah, I was like, that's vampires.
Um, if I'm remembering correctly, I thought it was about werewolves.
Or it could be werewolves, that's true.
Because
I was
Full
thinking
Moon,
vampires or werewolves. You know,
yes.
like my brain with I guess I was thinking too much Twilight. Like
Yeah.
new moon, full moon.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Full Moon. I mean, don't get me wrong, vampires exist, werewolves exist. They are heavily intertwined. So it's possible. I can't remember which one gets introduced, but I thought Full Moon was in reference to vampires.
It could. It took. You mean werewolves? Yeah, it could
Or,
be
sorry,
either or.
werewolves.
That was my guess. I have not read the synopsis
Yeah.
yet. I haven't gotten into it. I will probably, because I'm currently about 200 pages done with this book that I'm recently reading called "The Lady of the River" by Philippa Gregory, which is
Hmm.
basically just about the English
That doesn't
monarchy.
matter. It's the Dresden Files that you need to worry about. So just put
So
that
when I
away.
finish that, I will start book two of the Dresden Files.
Which they are mostly the same amount of pages, I think. So they're about like 320 pages, but it is an easy read. Some of them, which is where those of us who have been fans for a while got really annoyed, is some of them end at a spot where you're like, oh my God, I need to read the next one. And when the next book doesn't come out for 6 months, you get really angry. But
So I'll
you
be
do
good
get
for
what
the
you
first
can.
17, and then I'll be
Yes.
tortured with you guys later.
Yes. Well, but yeah, so there are things that like it's just right up front. So gentleman Johnny Marcone he does have the nickname gentleman. It does mean a lot. He has a very strict code that he follows. So I think and that's the interesting thing of he has this strict code. He's in charge of the mafia, which is a bad thing. And Harry interacts with him, but Harry also has friends and works with the police department who also have their own set of code and also care about the people under their protection. So how does he do this balancing act between the new people that he meets, his own moral understanding? Like he could as a wizard. I mean, he says on the yellow pages he doesn't do love potions, he doesn't do parties. He could very easily make money pulling a rabbit out of a hat for kids, you know? But he doesn't go to that because he understands magic has a price. You should only be using it for the good of people, unless like something really drastic happens. But like that's what he feels. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a whole other level, which I don't think is fully explained for a while. But Morgan shows up and he's talking about something called the Doom, or the, shoot, what do you call them?
The doom something, yeah.
Doom of Damocles, right?
Yes.
And so it is, I believe what it is, it's like they're not manacles on Harry Dresden that restrict his wizard powers, but he is under watch and he is under certain restrictions with how he uses his magic. And it was done to him by the White Council, which the White Council is the council of like elderly wizards who try
Watch
to
over everyone.
watch over, enforce codes, make sure that magic is being used properly. And so they're pretty scary,
Because
but they
there
don't.
is laws, there's magical laws in this.
Yes.
So that was the other thing. Like this book, like establishes exactly like how this magic system works. What are the laws of this magic system? Who enforces these laws?
Mhm.
So on and so forth.
And so you're curious because like Harry seems like a very decent guy. Like he's not living above his means. He's not doing parlor tricks. He's helping out the police department. So why does he have this crazy wizard named Morgan coming after him and thinking that he's a bad guy? And they definitely bring up that character and that situation interspersed over the next several books. And really, the more details that get explained about that situation just kind of cement what made Harry Dresden who he is today. Because you don't meet him when he's a young kid, you don't meet him when he's an elder. You meet him not quite at his prime, but he's a strong wizard. He's capable of surviving by himself, and you know he gets beat up a lot. We'll put it. He does get beat up a lot, so I can't
Yeah.
say much. I mean, he
In my
gets beat
head,
up
I
a whole
was
lot.
imagining him like in his 30s is like my head
Yeah.
canon. And I I was joking with Cheryl earlier off camera goes, "Oh, I have like some casting like if I were to put this cuz I think it already has a show, but if I were to like make a show or
Don't
a movie
ever
of this."
watch that TV show. It is a piece of crap. Don't do it to yourself.
Okay.
Like we were
But
talking, it took 17 books to lay out this world and get the characters, and they tried to fit most of those books in one season of a TV show,
oh no,
where the
no.
special effects and graphics were from, I think, the early 2000s, maybe. So
Oh no.
don't watch the TV show
I wasn't
ever.
planning on it. But so I was thinking in my head, and I actually was like, weirdly, I could see like a Robert Pattinson being Harry Justin. But then I was like, you were saying, wait, there's things and characters change and characters go on. So I'm excited to see who I would think. So that's going to be my prediction of this time. I'm thinking Robert Pattinson in my head as Harry
Just because you were
Dresden.
thinking Twilight and vampires, and get off that
Yeah.
train.
Actually, that's not why I was thinking it. I was thinking it because of the Batman trailer. And I thought what
I
I saw in Batman trailer, I was like, okay, this is get Harry Dresden's giving me those vibes from that trailer.
I am curious about Batman, and I do enjoy the trailer. I'm because part of it is a physical intimidation factor, right? So he doesn't have guns, he doesn't have tools with him, but when he walks into a room and he has the presence where he's trying to find somebody or he's trying to save somebody, like it is very evident that he is not to be messed with. And so I will say that I believe the casting in the TV show, which I don't even know if I finished it, was awful. But they did get somebody who was physically imposing. And if I'm misremembering, we're cutting this out in edits. But um, and that's the thing is a lot of these characters, even when you learn more about them, your idea of who would cast them, I think, changes. Whether it's mentally they've become stronger or affected by things or physically things happen. It's very different, and because the books exist already, I'm like, you can't. Maybe midway through we can do a casting, and then at the end see if we've changed our mind. But you
Because I
can't
was
do
even
that just
thinking
based
like
off the first
Viola
book.
Davis or Taraji P. Henson for like Murphy. Because I'm like,
Yeah, I mean those are good choices. Um, there are other characters you would potentially want them for instead.
okay, okay, okay.
Be,
So I know
and
you
that's
can continue talking Dresden forever and ever and ever. Is there?
we can't move off because I've got notes and I've got questions because I've been
Okay.
talking a lot and I've got questions.
Let's go
Um,
for it then. Yeah.
so what do you think are some of the themes that might be recurring throughout the series? Like you've gotten a good grasp of the first book. What was kind of your takeaway of a theme that you think could
I
carry through?
think we're going to continue with his moral code and his struggle with that because there are moments in the book where he's like, "Oh, I could be doing this, but I'm not going to." Or, "Oh, I could be doing this kind of thing and I don't want to spoil there." So I think we're going to have him with his moral code is going to be something that continually goes through the books. I think the relationship with Murphy and the police is something that's going to continue going throughout the books. Let's see. I did just like recently finish this. Uh, the
Bob's saga
Bob.
definitely continues. That will always be important to him. Again, read the books and you will understand exactly why we're smiling when we talk about Bob.
And
Um,
just to again about how like magic has a price, and I think we're gonna see how far Harry is going to be willing, what prices he's willing to pay for magic, and what prices other characters that we meet, other villains, other things are willing to pay for magic. Because we had a very interesting villain in this first book that he was willing to do whatever for whatever it took to have the power that he had. So I think those are going to be the things that continue through.
yeah, and to carry on that, one of the themes that I always think about when I read this series or talk about it is how people change and adapt to new scenarios. So Harry is a little bit sheltered. He is a wizard and he doesn't necessarily interact with much of society unless it's involved with his PI work or like with the detectives. The detectives don't know about magic, but eventually they're going to find out, right? I mean, if they're continuing on within the series, they're going to find out. You also have gentleman Johnny Marcone, who he grew up in the mafia, so that's guns, that's bodyguards, that's situations, and he's a pretty big presence later on. So he is going to be introduced to magic. So these people that have their core personality and these things that they have built up over the years, how how do they grow? What are the consequences of that growth when something kind of fundamental in their world changes? And that goes for Harry, it goes for the characters that are, well, except for Bob. Bob is Bob. um, but that goes, Bob is great. Um, but it goes for all the characters that are introduced, and most of them, they do get pieces, they do get more detail over time. So it's really interesting. And again, going back to the casting decision of who they are in book one, by the time it's book 17, they've been through a shit show. Like, that's one of my other themes. I'm sorry if we can't swear. I'm
Oh,
just being.
you can swear as much as you fucking want on this show. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, and this is like from the very beginning when I saw this, the thought that races through my head and keeps going on every single book is how much shitty luck can one person go through, right? Like, you talk about Harry in this first book, he has some really shitty luck, or luck. Whether it's to himself personally, the people around him, his vehicles, his home, like
It's a when it rains,
anything.
it pours for this guy. Like
Yeah,
reading the first book is like one bad thing happens and it just keeps snowballing, and you're like, when's this guy gonna catch a break?
yeah. And I mean, sometimes he catches a break, but at the same time, he just like powers through it and he's like, I'm not done with whatever the heck I need to do. So I'm just going to be doing it. Right. Um, so yeah, those are the other things. And the last theme that I think it's been introduced, but maybe just like started. But you have a clear definition in the series of good versus evil, and both both sides have very strict, again, moral codes, ethics, what fiber makes up their being. And when you realize the types of supernatural characters that get introduced. Like, we've already talked about Tut Tut, who's like a little fairy, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So you've got non-humans, you've got humans with magic, you've got regular humans, and you've got other things yet to be introduced. How has that battle of good versus evil been happening over time? What new things have been tried by both sides? And how has that conflict resolved some things, made things worse, and specifically screwed up Dresden's life? Like, that is a key tenet of the series going all the way through. And I forget, did we say who the evil or what the evil thing was in
I
this
think
book?
we'll keep that on the because
Okay.
I know we haven't really spoiled much, but let's keep that like on the
Okay.
DL.
Uh-huh.
We need to leave them wanting more, right?
Yeah. So, and then the last thing I want to leave us with, because I haven't mentioned it. Well, I mentioned it once a little bit, but the locations mentioned and described. You mentioned like the words used to describe the details of everything around Dresden. They're very important, and they grow over time and almost become their own characters. So, what was your first thought when McNally's pub was introduced?
I thought because it was interesting because there was a specific number that kept popping up with the pub, and the way that there wasn't any, that it was very friendly to wizards because it didn't have any like machinery. There's no jukebox in there. It is, you see board games, and even there's one time in the book where he's going to the pub to talk to the owner and to borrow something, and they're playing board games and stuff. So and it seemed like an area, it hinted that it was an area that was safe for wizards and that it has a specific number. And I'm guessing that there might be like a protection spell, which it doesn't say that in the book, but I'm guessing there's a protection spell there, or a protect, some kind of protection in that pub. And so I think this pub is going to play a big role just because of how like interesting the guy who owns the pub is. He's not a man of many words, but when he does speak, those words are important.
Yeah.
And I think just the way that things were mentioned, but kind of just left there. left there for you to wonder and think about. And I was like, okay, this is going to be picked up later because I know how many books there are in this series. I think it's going to be picked up later.
Yeah. So that's spot on. And again, when you read the other books, more details will come to light. But, there's a reason McNally's pub is introduced. There's a reason that those details are provided, to kind of hint at that curiosity, to indicate that there's something different about this place in the rest of Chicago. And that's one area. There's other locations introduced in later books that, again, same thing, is they're introduced. There's a little bit of groundwork and curiosity that's laid down, and then all of a sudden, you find out the full thing, or more stories get introduced that use it as a focal point, and you're like, oh, wow, that's cool, or that's different, or oh shit, that's scary. But it's kind of similar to characters, and that's these locations sometimes could be considered their own characters within the series.
And I know with a lot of books, like people go, oh, this book is very character driven or this book is very plot driven. And I think that weirdly, this book has like the amalgamation of both because you get these rich characters that maybe you don't know everything about them because it is a really long
Mhm.
series, but you do learn enough to keep you wanting more, and you learn like little interesting tidbits. Like there's tidbits that are mentioned about Harry's past yet, but it's kind of like just like giving you like a little piece, like salt, dude. Just like, geez, let me
Yeah.
sprinkle some. You'll find out more about this later. Um,
And I
but
will
then,
say it pays off. Some series, these tidbits get left off, the threads unravel, and they never come to a completion. But here, I mean, that's why he knows where he's going, is he knows how to bring those things back into the fold or tie them off appropriately that it makes sense. And it may take a book or a little bit of sprinkling through a few books, but they do get a resolution, or they continue to grow with the story. Which reminds me, I was smiling because I forgot what was explained about Tut Tut in book one.
so that Tut Tut, and I think too, which is funny because it reminded me of other books where, because he is a fairy, they live
A little fairy, like a tiny
a
fairy, not
tiny
like
like
a
little, yeah,
big. He's a little tiny fairy. Yeah.
that they live a very long life, so they don't remember much. And that, so like conversations or the way that he interacts with Tut in the past may not be remembered by Tut in the
Yeah.
here and now or even in the future. And that they love bread and honey and milk, and that because now we're living in a modern world, they don't have the access to the bread and honey and milk in the same way that they did back then. And so yeah, and that he's just like, and that they also,
So
apparently these fairies also love pizza.
exactly. I was going to say, so where we're going with this is, again, I said everything has a price, and some people or creatures are smarter than others with what they ask or what they want. And these little fairy creatures, the price for their help is a freaking modern day cheese pizza, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Dresden wants help from Tut Tut and his friends, he's like, I'm a pizza delivery guy. I've got, oops, wrong hand because that's not a hand. I've got a pizza for delivery. And that is what gains their loyalties. He feeds them pizza for their help, and their help like isn't much because they're little. And they're not very bright, as we mentioned.
But they got some information.
Yeah,
I was able to get
they're
that,
useful.
they were useful.
And did they bring up the nickname that they have for him yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, you're gonna text me randomly, and I'm gonna be like, okay, you got to that part, you got to that part, because it's adorable. It's the fairies, and Tut Tut is amazing. But my favorite character is still the cat, right?
Yeah, it has to.
I
A
went this
cat
long
that is
without
three
mentioning a
times,
cat.
yeah, that is three times its size, Mister.
Yes, that is
And
its name, Mister.
that was I texted you right when that cat was introduced, and I was like, I now I know why you like these books. It's because there's a cat. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. That's the first pet that he has. So, and it's a huge cat named Mister, and it's adorable. Yeah. So I think that wraps up everything about Dresden Files for this time. I mean, I told you I can talk about this stuff for
I,
hours
I
and
I I
hours.
expected it. I was like, we're
I
going
mean,
in. You've
and
been hounding on me to read this for so long that I'm like, okay. I'm expecting Cheryl to be like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I got
oh,
questions.
wait. I
Oh
lied
no.
because I looked at the summary. So they talked about soul gazes, yes or no, in
Yes.
this book. So it's a very intriguing thought. If you make eye contact with somebody else, no matter who you are, you exchange in the ability to look at that person's soul. Now, it may not be as straightforward as you would think, but it's supposed to give you an indication of like this person's core personality, right? And
Hmm.
in that scenario, when you're doing the soul gaze, you're kind of like unaware of your surroundings and unaware of other things. So it's something that in Harry Dresden's world, if you're in the know, you don't look people in the eyes. Because if you accidentally look somebody in the eyes who you don't know, no matter where you are, you're just going to get like trapped in the soul gaze. Well, I think as long as you have magic, that happens. I don't think normal people do that, right?
Well,
So that's
he
you can do it with
he's
normal people, but
yeah.
normal people don't end up in soul gazes with themselves. Um,
Although there's one thing I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I don't want to spoil.
I mean, this book has been out for 20 years now, okay? If you haven't read these books and you haven't left this show to go read them right now, I mean, it's your own fault, okay?
And
Um,
it is. This book is 6 years younger than me.
oh my God. Oh,
Almost, almost seven. Cause my birthday's not this month, but it's next month. January 26th, 2021. I will
happy
be
early
27 years
birthday.
old. Yes.
Okay, so I will stop talking about Dresden
All
Files.
right. I'm sure I will be messaging you and voice chatting you for more stuff later outside the show. But we have our Dresden Files expert. So anytime I need some Dresden File expert on the show, Cheryl's gonna be the one that's coming on.
Just not the TV show, not the
Yeah.
TV show. Somebody else can get it.
So let's go into something that is not Dresden's Files. Our
Um,
recent TV watch. So what have you recently watched?
um, so I fit into my wonderful schedule of watching other people live streaming and me gaming. A few episodes of The Queen's Gambit, which I am not a chess player, so I was a little bit wary of starting the series, but I was intrigued because you see the girl who's playing the main character, and she seems pretty quirky. She seems pretty different. And, not that many women go into a competitive chess field. So I started it. I've seen a few episodes, and I really, really, really like it. So I do need to make time and take away from playing video games to go finish it. It's season one. It dropped on Netflix a few weeks ago, I think. So if you have Netflix, you can go check it out. Highly, highly recommend it.
This is a series that I have not seen yet, but my mom and my dad and my brother and sister-in-law have seen all 8 episodes of it. And they're like, "You gotta get on it." And
Yeah.
it's funny because it's like one of those days where if I'm with them, we're either watching like Great British Bake Off or the show that I'm going to discuss right after this, that we finished the fourth season of. And it was weirdly like it was one of the days that I wasn't at home or I was off doing something else, like here in my room, and they watched it without me. And so it was one of those just like, well, now that you watched it without me, because I
Yeah.
don't know when I'm going to get to it.
Yeah, and I I like the shows that kind of harken back to the old days because I feel like as a student or as a US citizen growing up in the United States, when we're in school, there's like a portion of history that really gets rushed through. And that is, I believe like the mid to late 1900s, because you spend a lot of time in the beginning of how the country was founded and government and stuff. And then it's like, oh my God, we've got a month to the end of the year. Let's pack in everything from like 1950s to current day over a month and then take a test and forget about it next year. Um, so this series takes place, I believe, in the 60s, and it doesn't sugarcoat things. So, like Mad Men had some areas where it would explain, okay, the women are at home, they're stay-at-home mothers or wives, and they just sit around knitting or whatnot, and the fathers are at work. Sorry, wrong hand. At work, but they're really playing hanky pank with the secretary, or they're like, having affairs, spending money, gambling, drinking, what have you. And this one goes into that a bit. And it also goes into um, the status of orphans back in the day, who the reason that it's highlighted, and probably part of the reason why they picked this actress and styled her this way, is she's supposed to be a little girl who, I believe when she's 9, she gets orphaned, and she goes to an orphanage. And there's very few cars. They're in an orphanage that is pretty religious. They're all in one classroom learning. The girls, only girls, ages, from very young. Some of the young ones get adopted to the ones who are almost old enough to age out, so like 17. But up until they age out, if they don't get adopted, they're just isolated from the rest of society. They only have the other girls and their few teachers, and the head of the orphanage, and that's pretty much it. So if you don't fit into that mold or you're too old to get adopted, well, they also drug them, which happens back in the day. They're like, oh, you're hysterical. Here, take some drugs and you're out of your mind. And that makes things worse. And we're going to keep doing this to you and you have no choice. So, of course, she develops a pretty bad drug habit when she's 9, right? So there's the struggle of how you deal with that. She does get adopted, and you see her interact in the rest of society, and it, that did happen.
Mhm.
That's what orphanages were like back in the day. The foster care system evolved from orphanages, and it has its problems, but at the same time, they didn't have their own room. So it's like this big room and there's like, what, 20 beds just in there? Like, so you have no privacy. All you get is like this little cupboard to put your things in case you do get adopted. And it's just, that's what life was like back then. And it's interesting to see that and how she deals with the situation, the reasons why the couple adopted her. Um, that also happened back in the day. It's an interesting look at that time period.
Yeah, it's something that's definitely on my list, and just how much that my mom and my dad and my brother and sister-in-law have been saying how good of a show it is. Like even just today, mom was like, "You need to get on it." Like, okay. Uh, I eventually get to it, and then I'm like, why did I take so long taking these recommendations from people, aka
Yeah.
Dresden Files earlier to discuss. Um, so we'll go into my recent pick, which is The Crown season 4. We finally meet Princess Diana in this. So here, and I'm going to mispronounce Prince Philip's actor who plays him, but we this is the Olivia Colman as Queen Elizabeth, Tobias Menzies, like I said, probably wrong, for Prince Philip, Elizabeth Debicki as Princess Diana, and Josh O'Connor as Prince Charles.
A
And
for effort on the names. A for
thank
effort.
you, thank you, thank you.
Outstanding.
And this is a show that I've just I love this show, and I think it's so smart. Where the first two seasons, you have it where it's Claire Foy playing Queen Elizabeth in her younger years when she first takes uh, the monarchy, when she becomes the queen after her father passes away, and then these two middle ones, the third and fourth season, is like the middle years. And finally, like, we go all the way, I think it's like 85 is like the last episodes. It's in the 80s because we have Princess Diana and then her and Prince Charles getting married and things of that. We haven't gotten to Princess Diana's death yet, which I'm guessing is going to be in the next season. But the later two seasons are going to have Queen Elizabeth and all new host of characters being their older selves, because I think it might hopefully maybe go to present day. And this what's funny about this show is I know that a lot of us know of Princess Diana's story, and she was just loved around the world, and how much like people felt really bad for her and the situation that she was put in with the royal family. But what I didn't expect with this show is how badly I felt for Prince Charles,
Mhm.
because like, and this is one thing that you notice throughout the whole season, is that the biggest problem that this family has is not allowing people to marry who they love. So you have the abdication of uh, her uncle, Queen Elizabeth's uncle, King Edward the, I forget what number he
Whichever.
is,
Yeah.
whichever number, that he abdicated from the throne because they weren't going to let him marry an American divorcee. So he
Mhm.
had to give up his crown to marry the woman he loved, which funny enough, Prince Harry is married to Meghan Markle, an American divorcee. So obviously
They learn their
things change.
lesson.
Yeah, things change. Um, and then you have Princess Margaret wasn't able to marry the person that she loved because he was divorced. Prince Charles wasn't able to marry Camilla, who he now is married to Camilla, but
Yeah.
he was in love with Camilla from the beginning, met her before Diana. She was the only woman for him, like, light of his life,
I mean,
kind of. And
there are challenges. Like there was an article that came up talking about, I guess, Princess Anne, who
mhm,
is Queen Elizabeth's um,
daughter.
daughter, married someone she met in like on the equestrian circuit. So it wasn't a match made; it was supposedly love, but there were affairs, there was travel separation. It's the duty of the family. I mean,
Yeah.
just because you love somebody doesn't mean it's going to be easy and that everything's going to work out, especially when you are involved with the royal family.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's funny too, now you think about it, is that three of Queen Elizabeth's children, three out of the four, have been divorced. We don't need to get into Prince
Yeah.
Andrew and his stuff, but which
That's not this kind of show.
that's not this kind of show. But it's just really funny to like go in and have that little bit closer to a family that has been very private. And obviously, like, this show is a historical fiction, so it's not going to be 100% accurate.
Mhm.
The historical things that happen, like the fog in season one, or the wars that happen, like oh, what are those islands, the islands that are off of
Of
Argentina?
Falcons.
Fall, yeah. the
Falcons. Yeah.
so those things did happen, but like the conversations between the royal family or between the prime minister, we do get to meet Margaret Thatcher in the show this year. And just like the duality between Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher, two women who were born the same year, and had different lives, different ways of
Mhm.
coming up, but then ended up being these two women in power, Margaret Thatcher being the first woman prime minister of the UK. And so it was very cool to see their duality as well. So this show is very interesting. It obviously I have a affinity for the royal family, not just modern, but again, like the book I mentioned earlier, it was this is the
That book doesn't
1400s,
exist. Go back to the
the
Dresden Files.
the 1400s English family, and just the fact that there's so many like juicy and interesting stuff from with the royal family all the way back then to even now, like there's so many like what you would say juicy and tabloid worthy things that happened with the royal family all through its history. So yeah.
So that's where I see episodes here and there, but I can't binge it, and I have to like be in the right mood for it because I love historical focused stories, especially in TVs or movies, like the visual aspect of it and bringing that to life. And I do like biographies, but for me, it's a little bit weird given how many of the people involved in the show or the stories about the people involved are still alive or
Hmm.
have such a huge impact to people who are still alive that to me, I have to take it in small doses.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I joked with my dad is that they got all of the stuff with Princess Diana like over with. The royal families thought of in a good light, and Netflix said, "You thought we're gonna bring this all back up to the surface for everyone to think and talk about again."
Yeah, yeah.
So that is that is weird, but I think too at the same time because it is people who are from the UK working on it and the actors
Hmm.
are from the UK, that I feel that because it is their queen and it is the royal family that to me I think they've done it in a respectful way
Hmm.
of looking at history, and hopefully like I I have to check in on how like historically accurate it is, but with all the like the events that have taken place like are historically accurate. So
For
yeah,
me, that's
I
where
enjoy
it's
the show.
like your face is at the door looking through a peephole of
Yeah,
something that you shouldn't be seeing. And I'm like, these people are still
alive.
alive. Their kids are still alive, and they're not rushing to promote. Like, there's a difference if a group of children are like, we want to support a biography about my father who was very much for a specific organization or a specific story, and it was like his life work, and we want to be involved in showcasing that. And yes, they are respectful, but just for me, it's a little bit too strange in that aspect.
I got
Yeah.
that.
But I hear it's
So
a really good show.
so because we did talk for a very long time on our recent books. We're going to skip the recent movies this week, but it will come back next week, so don't worry about it.
It's
And
all my fault. You can blame me. Hey, I remembered the hand, the right
so we're
hand.
going to go straight into our anything extra. So this could be music, video games, anything really extra that you want to talk about. So, what is your anything extra this week?
So, anyone who follows my very small Twitch account right now knows that I have been getting back into video games. So, I've played a lot of video games, and uh, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has taken up most of my time, but that's a big game. Everybody knows about it, everybody talks about it. So, we're going to skip over that and go and focus on two indie games that I've played recently that if you were paying attention when they came out, they had gotten great reviews. They were like highly touted. Everyone loved them. But if you happen to miss them, it may not be on your radar. So they're smaller games, they are cheaper, they don't take up as much of your time, but they are absolutely amazing. And I forget which one I said was going first.
So the first one is the one that I mispronounced with the
Okay,
B.
Bastion.
Yeah.
So there we go. And I I can't talk about these as much as I could talk about Dresden Files. So one of the things that is so phenomenal about this game is you see the picture right there. What they did is they hired an artist, and the backdrops and a lot of the character work, that is all like painted, I believe.
Oh,
So those
wow.
weren't done with 3D animation, 3D graphics. A lot of it was done with a real painter in mind, I believe. Um, so that's the main character. He's called the Kid for most of it. What happens is you are this character, you wake up and you're like, something really bad has happened, which they call the calamity. I mean, pretty on the nose, these things. You meet a stranger, you meet what is it, the singer. Like, these are strangers to you, and until you get to know them a little bit, like, you don't know about their names or their background. They're just like a generic title. But it's an adventure. um oh wow, blanking on the type of game, but you've got to defeat some enemies, learn how to block. Requires some strategy. And it's gorgeous. It's that style is around the entire game. It's so gorgeous. But the other amazing thing for this game is the narrator. So it sounds like an old Western cowboy is narrating you, the kid. I said you wake up and you're the kid adventuring around this calamity, and they're narrating what you do. I'm pretty bad at some video games, so I tend to fall off of things or die a lot. And so, like, that'll be incorporated into the narration, like the kid took a tumble off the ledge, like, and so when it drops you back on, and if you keep doing it, there's like slight variations. But imagine me saying that in a cowboy old western, like, gruff male voice, which I'm not going to spoil it. If you're interested in this, look up afterwards who the voice actor is who does the narration, and I will say it's not who you would expect. It is a complete, to me at least, difference of the picture I had in my mind of who was narrating this.
Okay,
But he
okay.
does a phenomenal job, and um, I said I'm pretty terrible at it. So I was able to finish it. There's of course other things that you can do with it, like you can get higher scores on certain things. But it takes a few hours. It's not that expensive, but it's fun. It's gorgeous, and every little while you could replay it if you want. Um, so yeah, that's Bastion. The soundtrack's decent too. I will say that. I did get the music stuck in my head a little bit as I was playing it, but that's okay. It's great.
It happens.
Um, so the next one that I highly, highly recommend is called Journey. Not the band, not that, but this game is absolutely gorgeous, and it's like a platform puzzle
Oh, then
game.
I'll love this game because platform games are my ish.
But what you, I, okay, how do I explain it? I'll talk about the spoilers at the end. But okay, so you're this character, which it's right there. I'll find another one that's more of the close up of the character, or some screenshots that can get put in because it's gorgeous. And you're this character. Nobody talks in this game. So what is
Okay.
driven is the environment that you're in, how the character interacts with the environment, and the music slash sound effects. So the soundtrack for Journey is absolutely phenomenal. It is orchestral. It ebbs and flows as the environment around you changes. So like when you start, you're in the middle of a desert. There's sand that you're trudging through. There's wind that's trying to sweep you by. And so when it happens, it's a little bit harder to walk. Um, but what you're looking for is you're looking for these like little pieces of, I forget what they're called. They're glowy things. They're shiny things. I always go after shiny things in games, right? That's what you
Like a cat.
do. A little bit. Let's put it that way. Yes, sure. Um, but what it does is it makes like your scarf go longer. The longer you are, the more of them that you collect, and then you can use them to do certain things. Like you get to fly eventually. Um, but as you're adventuring, there's also not really instructions for this. It's very much you're in an environment and there's something off in the distance. And you're like, oh, that's cool. Let's walk towards it and see what happens when we get closer or what appears when we're going there. And at certain points throughout the game, and it's not preset, it just happens throughout the game, is you will see a second similar character to you. And you can communicate with them. Not through talking, but you hit a button on the controller or whatever, and it has different, like a symbol and a glowy thing, and like you can talk back and forth through that. But you're not like, it's not a voice chat, it's not anything. And it's not text through the screen. It's just you are following them, they are following you, they're hinting at something, maybe you know what's going on, maybe they do, and you just adventure together through these different environments. And this game, I believe, was released in 2017, or maybe it was re-released in 2017. So when it first came out, it was a PlayStation exclusive. So I had watched somebody play it, but I hadn't played the entire thing myself. I'm like halfway through it now, but they re-released it, or it's available on Steam right now for, I think it's on sale for $10.
Using the wonderful Google 2012 video game.
Okay, so it came out in 2012 and it was a PlayStation exclusive, and then I think it became available on Steam in 2017.
Okay.
And this was by a studio that did very experimental gaming. As you can tell, there's, like I said, there's no voice, there's no talking in this game. So that was one of the things that they wanted to remove and see if you could still get a gaming experience. And what fills that void is the music and the interaction that you can still have, even though you're not talking to anybody, right? Because you're adventuring with this other person. It is very gorgeous. There's geometrics, there's different ways of using light. There's like shimmering, like you're in the desert and you're going through sand, and there's like a sun up in the sky. So it's movement. And then here's where I'll get into the spoilers is I'm pretty sure everyone I talked to who finished this game on their first run through ended up crying at that.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's just the way it ends is so emotional. And then, which is weird because you're like, how attached are you to a character when you don't talk or have any dialogue or anything? But like, you get it. It is a journey. That's why it's called that. It's a journey with this character through this environment.
Journey of emotions.
Basically, yeah. And then at the very end, there's a surprise in the credits that blows your mind. I haven't gotten there yet, so I don't know, because when this was on PlayStation, it was all the time, and I don't know how many people are playing this on Steam. But you know how I said you're traveling with a companion and they'll appear randomly? You could end up playing actual spoiler. Anytime you see that, they're different people. So you end the game, you may have played with 25 different people and not known it.
Oh, wow.
Because,
okay.
and actually, it must be an AI. So the difference is, as a person going through the game once, you have that red robe that is in the picture, I believe, like red-brown robe. Yeah. If you've completed the game, I think you have like a silver lined or a silver robe. So people who have completed the game can choose to play it again and help the other person find the puzzle pieces, right? So that's where you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And you'll just find out in the distance, like somebody doing that symbol and light thing. And you're like, oh, there's somebody who can help me. Let me go see what they're up to, and they'll like help you without talking to you, get you where you need to go. And at the end, you're like, I thought I was playing with one person, or I thought I was playing with the AI, and you played with 25 other real people, right?
Wow, okay, that's very interesting. I like the fact how when people do experimental things like that, where this is an experimental game where you're taking a video game and you're doing something a little bit different than a normal
Mm-hmm.
video game. And that's very interesting. Now you're making me want to get, how much is it on Steam?
I think it's $10 right now. Let me double check.
Worth it. I should
It
have
is.
checked yesterday. So with well, we're recording this Tuesday. It comes out on Wednesday. Should have checked on Monday, Cyber Monday. Dang.
No, so Steam does their autumn sale. It's not restricted to just Cyber Monday. So let me see. Let me double check the store. I think it's just
It
uh,
says
it
fourteen
says
ninety nine on Epic
14.99.
Store. Yeah. 14.99. So if you want to play this awesome game, which I think I'm probably going to end up playing, it's 14.99.
I'm
Okay.
not
That
sure if it comes with the soundtrack, but I'll randomly put the soundtrack playing on YouTube in the background for random things. Which, speaking of, we this is a new show for you. This is your first experience. I want to be the first guest who maybe gets your show pulled for copyright infringement. Let's play some music. Let's play some music from Journey. I don't know if they go around like trying to do copyright strikes. I don't know who owns the music for this game, but we're gonna put some music up so you guys can get a taste of this game.
wow, like as a band kid myself, that ah sounds so good.
It can
Even
tug
before I
at your
play it, I'm probably
heartstrings.
gonna listen to the music now because watch out for this upcoming Sunday. I might actually choose this music even if I haven't played the game because there's a certain topic on our next Get Sweaty episode. So you might see this again. Maybe. We'll see. If I don't have my other five picks, this might come on it. Little teaser there. So
Also, if you guys are doing video soundtracks, this one is the top of a lot of people's lists. Like, yeah.
we'll go into now my next one, which my anything extra is a comedy special on Netflix. It's Taylor Tomlinson, Quarter Life Crisis. So I just want to what Netflix puts in their description. She's halfway through her 20s and she's over it. Too old to party, too young to settle down. Comedian Taylor Tomlinson takes aim at her life choices. And the thing is that this is so funny. And I think too, where like with me, I'm 26, about to be 27. I very much related to this comedy special in the fact that she was talking about one of like the really funny jokes that she did is she's not ready to get married, she's not ready yet to do that, but she does want to eventually get married, she does want to have kids. One of those like she sees a baby and it's like ooh baby fever kind of thing, and I was like oh that's happened to me before where like you see it's like cute thing, now I need to make cute thing, but then brain goes you still live with your parents, we don't need to make cute thing now.
All you need is them going to the bathroom, having to change a diaper, or a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. You're like, nope, I'm good. You're a parent. Take your kid back.
Yep, pretty much. And so she was talking about how she went to her friend's wedding and that the she would after looking at the bride for a little bit because the bride was doing a very slow walk, turns to look at the groom and she's like because I'm going to get my money's worth and dry. And she goes and if that was me, she goes if I was walking down the aisle and I look at the groom and he is not crying at my beauty, we're gonna have a stop the wedding sidebar. Hi everyone, just 1 second sidebar. If you don't fucking cry, and she goes, and that is where I realized I am not ready to get married.
Maybe, maybe not.
Because so it was just funny things along that line. And then a really funny thing. So I watched this with my mom, dad, and sister-in-law over the Thanksgiving weekend. My brother was with my niece, like putting her to bed, and I think he might have fell asleep while putting her to bed as well. But this obviously was recorded before COVID, and so my dad goes, because there's an audience, and dad goes, "Is this pre-COVID or is this just South Dakota?"
That is a true statement. Good question. Good question.
Good question. So that was pretty funny to thinking. But yeah, really good Netflix special. Netflix puts out some really great comedy specials. Definitely go check that one out if you haven't yet. But I guess this is the end of our longest episode of Soul Talk. Goes
Yes.
hopefully next week it'll probably be a little bit shorter, but we had a pretty big topic with our Dresden File expert here. So Cheryl, where can the people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at, I believe that's it, right? Cheryl_Corman, as well as Instagram. I've got Cheryl.Corman. And I'm also, I don't know, I read the Dresden Files books, so definitely read this set of books and feel free to talk to me about them because as I've proven today, I can talk about them for a long time. So.
And you can find me at Soul Govin on Twitter and at soul.k.govin on Instagram. You can find me here every Wednesday on Soul Talk. Find me almost every Sunday if I have the time on Get Sweaty here on the Media Sweaties Network. So thank you guys for joining on our longest episode, and we'll see you next week. Bye.